Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. As far as I know, this is the first birthday party that we've thrown as part of the Library Lecture Series, but we would like to welcome you to the third Library Lecture for the spring semester, and we are so honored to have Pamela Howland and Wendell Myers. Pamela Howland trained at the Wisconsin Conservatory of Music and the Eastman School of Music, where she received the Doctor of Musical Arts in Piano Performance and Literature. She has appeared from coast to coast in the United States as both soloist and chamber musician and made numerous European tours. Highlights include features, return engagements in Paris, Vienna, and Warsaw, a tour of Colombia, South America, and live solo appearances on National Public Radio. She has recorded 9 CDs, made a documentary film on Chopin called Remembering Frederick, the Genius of Chopin, and is a part-time assistant professor in the Department of Music here at Wake Forest. Wendell Myers earned a Bachelor of Fine Arts from Peck School of the Arts at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee in 1979, and an MD from Wake Forest School of Medicine in 1990. He's been practicing radiologist in the area for 20 years, but returned to painting 5 years ago. He recently left his full-time position at Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center, continuing to practice part-time so that he could devote more of his time to art. Last year, this talented duo began their musical and visual art collaboration with Night Music, which combines Pam's recordings and performances of all 19 nocturnes of Chopin, paired with Wendell's 19 original paintings. Today's presentation comes directly out of that project, and we would like to welcome you, Pamela and Wendell.
Thank you very much, and welcome to all. We are all on an experiment here today. I don't think this has been done in the library, and this is a hybrid, multi-sensory experience, if you will. So Joy wanted me to tell you a little bit about how we conceived of this. Just so you know that Wendell and I last year made a short 6-minute film, which we're going to show you, which probably explains better what night music is in our collaboration than we could do standing up here blabbering at you. So we're going to run that film, but Joy also said, please note there is cake over there, birthday cake, refreshments, and we are doing this, even though it's in the library, salon style. You are free to get up and move around. We will have the film, and then I will be playing 5 nocturnes for you today, and Wendell has all of those paintings here live, so you can get up and walk around and see them. Now, there's one that's missing, and ironically enough, we have the owners of that painting here, but not the painting. We didn't know they were coming. But as I am performing, we'll have a PowerPoint, so you'll be able to see the painting, and then you have many of them live. So after that, then we're going to do our big experiment of I'll play another Chopin piece, and Wendell will paint to that. So we welcome you. This is our living room. We welcome you to make yourself at home, and please have cake. We can't take it home, so. All right, so let's watch that film now.
Good evening. I'm Wendell Myers.
Good evening. I'm Pam Howland.
What night music means to me is, in this particular case, it's a collaboration between Pam and myself dealing with Chopin's night music, his nocturnes, 19 of them in all. Part 1 is 10, and my paintings, one painting for each of the nocturnes. Trying to express in some way, visually, what is expressed in these pieces of music.
Night music got started actually out of a much bigger idea that I had, starting some years ago. And it really revolves around the idea that I feel like the traditional piano concert, as it's always been, where I walk out on stage and I bow and people clap and I sit down and I play and we keep repeating that, but there's not enough connection for me with the audience.
The process that I went through to try and create art that goes with the nocturnes was kind of multifaceted. The idea that certain keys go with certain colors. Another thing that I tried to think in terms of was the rhythm of the music. A lot of these pieces have an arpeggiated accompaniment in the left hand, a very repeated pattern in the left hand that produces a sense of motion.
In the first nocturne in B-flat minor, you hear this brooding sound that we hear this beautiful melody in the right hand, and then there's this wonderful arpeggio accompaniment in the left hand, and he mixes these sounds and colors, so he really takes you to this space. But like in all of his works, there's a middle section where all of a sudden the sun comes out, and there's a little bit of joy and hope, but then usually he goes back to the darker side. And one of the other things that Chopin was a genius at was adding the element of time into music. And of course, music is movement in time from beginning to end, but I mean the idea of past, present, and perhaps even future. Chopin is the first composer, romantic composer, who's able to actually capture for us the sense that, oh, this is happening right in the present, and then you go to a memory. You know, he'll dream off into another spot, and you'll think it's something from the past. One of the nocturnes makes me think that he's writing a letter to someone.
I thought about the passage of time being horizontal and the marking of time, like the rhythm, being a vertical element. And you can see that in the way that music is written, the staff and the measures. The passage of time being the horizontal staff, and the marking of time by the measures and the beats in the measures as being a vertical element. But I found as time went on that normally I paint very spontaneously, without a plan, and I found that these ideas were helpful ideas to think about, but too rigid and too literal. I had thought in the beginning that I would really get away from landscape. Most of my paintings are abstract landscapes, and I thought, music is so non-objective, so abstract, without reference necessarily, in most cases, to something specific like a landscape.
What I really hope is that, and I hope this for all my concerts, but this concert in particular, is that the audience can come just as they are and sit down after, no doubt, a long, hard day and not be thinking about me and how I'm playing the piano or thinking about, oh, how did that guy paint these paintings? But they can hopefully scale down, center down into that place inside themselves where their essence lies, so they can have a connection with their heart, and they can hear whatever it is they hear in Chopin's music, and they can see whatever they see and feel through Wendell's works. Because the whole point of this is, again, to focus on that special place inside themselves that makes them unique, and a place where they can go and dream away.
There are several things that I would like people to take away from their experience of this project. I would like them to feel the emotion that's in these musical pieces. And I would like them, hopefully, to see some correlation between what's expressed in the paintings and what's expressed in the music. To me, art is it's not just about expression. It's not just about me expressing myself or Pam expressing herself through how she plays. Art is an attempt to communicate. And what you really are hoping to do, in my opinion, is to not only communicate that emotion to the viewer or the listener, but to evoke that emotion.
When I play these Chopin nocturnes, it's really very frequent that I think about him sitting at the piano at night, playing his night music, and I imagine what it must have been like for him to go through an entire difficult day of teaching and hobnobbing with his patrons, but then at night he finally could sit at the piano and do his dreaming. So that's a little bit of an introduction to this concept. I did want to say a little bit, because it is Chopin's birthday, and he's 205, just so you know. And we're celebrating this here in, we were in Greensboro yesterday with a big celebration with 10 pianists and no visual art there, but it was, we had a film, the documentary film that we made. But today, with the visual art, we're attempting to keep up with our friends in Warsaw, who, in collaboration with the Chopin Society, are putting on 8 days of birthday events. Chopin's birthdays are February 22nd and March 1st. And what that is in Warsaw, they're celebrating all 8 days, but it's mostly likely that he was born one day, but the government record wasn't recorded or established until March 1st. So nobody really knows. So we figure if we love him so much, we'll celebrate it all. So I guess the only other thing I would say, I'm going to play for you 5 nocturnes. The nocturnes, of course, the nocturne comes from the word nocturnal, and I encourage you, oddly enough, to close your eyes if you want, even though we have all this visual. You will have the painting that Wendell painted right in front of your eyes. I have to say that some of these paintings have been in storage, but we've just got them out, and they've been in my piano studio. And for me, when I'm playing and staring at these paintings, I'm just so drawn in that it's really wonderful. So you may want to do that. And for sure, you may want to look at the physical paintings afterwards. Chopin, as you may or may not know, had huge emotions, but he did not readily or easily share them with people verbally. So there aren't fancy, flowery titles to these pieces. I'm going to play you Nocturne number 1, number 2, number 7, number 11, and number 19. Now, that's not what you see here in the paintings, but he, I think, wanted to encourage the listener to feel what they felt. So keep in mind the different kinds of music you might hear at night, the different kind of nights you may have. You may have a romantic night, a stormy night, a violent night, bad dreams, good dreams, something very peaceful. And I think you'll hear that in these pieces. So the first piece is B-flat minor, and you will hear this kind of, I'm just making this up now, this isn't from the piece, but this kind of left-hand accompaniment. Arpeggio, so it's very wide-ranging, and so that's what the left hand is doing. And then the right hand has very, very, very beautiful melody. Now, there are sectional forms. If we start out in the minor key, we may go to the major key. So you can imagine for the painter how there's so many different elements in music. The question was, what do you paint? One of them? All of it? You know, how do you conceptualize that? At any rate, so the first piece has that classic nocturne accompaniment and beautiful singing melody, very moody. The second piece is number 2 in E-flat major, and it's very famous. You probably will know it. The third piece I'll play is the Nocturne number 7. It's the only one that Wendell did not paint in this 30 by 40 size. It's, what is it? 30 by 30, so it's a little bit different. And then number 11 has a different feature. It's brooding, but does not have that left-hand accompaniment. It's more of a dirge. So. And interestingly enough, he wrote this on the island of Majorca when he was suffering very much from physical sickness, and it has a different feel. It doesn't have a flowing character like the previous ones do. And then I will end the concert with number 19, which is the last, probably the last nocturne he worked on, but he started it as a youth. His sister died when she was 14 of tuberculosis, and he probably was writing it for her. So these are number 1, 2, 7, 11, and 19, all in the minor key except for number 2. you very much. And now we are going to, any questions? Or would you like to just paint? Okay, if we have any questions, we can certainly take questions afterwards. What I'm going to do is play not a nocturne, because Wendell's already painted those 19 nocturnes. So you could paint those for your whole life. Do you want to say anything about that? Do you want to, I'll talk while you get set up. Okay. I'm going to play for you the 15th Prelude, Opus 28, which again, as I mentioned, Chopin was not a composer to give fancy titles, pictorial titles, what we call programmatic titles, but he was a believer in abstract titles. However, Chopin, you remember, was born in 1810 and he died in 1849, so he only lived 39 years. He spent the first half of his life in Poland, where he was born, Polish mother, and then he spent the second half of his life in France. He had a French father, but who had emigrated to Poland. So very, very Polish. However, there was a German composer who came after Chopin who adored his music. His name was Hans von Bulow. And there are 24 preludes in Opus 28. He composed these on the Isle of Majorca. But Hans von Bulow gave a pictorial title to every one. So in other words, this famous one in A major he called The Polish Dancer. Chopin called that Prelude in A major, Opus 28, number 7. So this is, he would not have liked these pictorial titles. So there is one famous piece that's often called the Raindrop Prelude, and this is what I'll be playing while Wendell is painting to the raindrop.
Now, I can't pretend that I know what's going to happen.
We have tried this one other time in a very informal, but I will promise Wendell that I will be playing from music, so that I don't cut the piece too short if I make a mistake. So he has the full 5 minutes for painting.
I can tell you, I'm unlikely to finish this in 5 minutes. I probably have finished a few paintings in 5 minutes, but that doesn't happen very often. So it's not going to be a complete finished painting, but we'll see what happens.
Let me tell you, while you prepare yourself further, a little bit about the form of this prelude, which also can lend itself to a painting or not. It's in a very typical 3-part form that we would call ABA. And Hans von Bulow, rightly so, in his own imagination and others, called this the Raindrop Prelude because you're going to be hearing this repeated note, which often sounds like a gentle raindrop. So in this A section, this first section, this is in the major key, maybe a brief storm, not even a storm, just a little pattering of rain. In the middle section, which goes to the minor key, it gets very dramatic, like a thunderstorm. And then it returns in the A to much the same material as in the beginning. So that's how formally the music is laid out. Would you like to say anything else?
Because Pam was talking about the ABA form, I just thought I would mention that in a number of the nocturnes, they have that same form. And when I started doing these paintings, I thought, well, okay, we read paintings from left to right, or we tend to, so I'm going to do an A section, a B section, and then return to the A section. And I really only stuck to that for 2 paintings. The first one, which was the first one you saw, the green on both sides and the purple in the middle. And number 2 there, which has, the left side and the right side are very similar, and then it has a center section, which is different. But like I said in the little film, I started to feel like that was too restrictive. But this piece is very much like that, so I may or may not do something like that. I never know until I get there.
We will be happy to take some questions afterwards, but I think we should let Wendell get painting. So this is the experiment, which I think Chopin would have thought was kind of interesting, to Chopin's Raindrop Prelude, so-called Raindrop Prelude. Prelude in D-flat major, opus 15, excuse me, opus 28, number 15. Well, I just think it's really fascinating to see this process because, you know, music unfolds in time, and when we see visual art or we read something, it's not a performance art that we ever get to have the window into the performance. And so seeing some of the process, I think, is really interesting. Does anybody have any questions at all for Wendell?
Yes, I'm very, very. In the case of this project, yes, I was very familiar with all of these pieces. I've heard them dozens and dozens of times. I would need to hear it. I would need to hear it. Yeah, and when I was painting the 19 paintings that went with this project, I was listening mostly to Rubinstein because Pam's recordings weren't completed yet. And interestingly enough, Rubinstein recorded all 19 nocturnes 3 times in his life. And the last time he did that, he was in his 80s. And that was the version that I used when I painted because I felt like those were the most expressive and heartfelt of all 3 of his versions. And I had that music on all the time, even when I was just gessoing the canvas. And one thing that happened during that project that I thought was very interesting and really confirmed for me the idea that there's a strong unconscious element that works with the music and the painting. I was almost done with the painting for the 10th Nocturne. And I thought, well, I'm going to finish it now. This is, you know, I'll put the music on and I'll do just a few more things with it and it'll be done. And it veered off in another direction and just completely fell apart. And then I realized I've got the wrong nocturne on. I had to do it over again. You know, I had to start over. But so that kind of said to me, this thing is real. There's really something to this.
I think one of the other things that people have asked us about in the process, what we learned, and we did stay married after this long process, but I don't see the way Wendell sees, and he doesn't hear the way I hear, which is fine, but in collaboration, he came up with a beautiful painting, and I said, well, that's not how it sounds to me, or I played an interpretation that wasn't quite the way he saw it. So it gave us a lot of things to think about.
It wasn't quite like that.
Well, that's a good story. I think that's the appropriate story.
The first one that I finished, she said, "Oh, I don't like that at all."
No, I liked the painting, but to me, it wasn't number one.
Yeah.
So don't misrepresent that.
Okay. Interestingly enough, that's the first one that sold.
Yes, and thank you. The other thing I wanted to say is we have a couple of friends here today, but first of all, I wanted to thank Joy, who's see here, and Christian for putting this together. I know this is an unusual venture, but we are so glad that you did, and everybody else who helped. But we have Laura Hart-McKinney and Anne Gwill here, who are producers on the movie that we made when we took the crew to Poland and France. So if you're interested in the life of Chopin, this is all to help celebrate these Chopin birthday parties, but we do have that film here and some CDs. And I think that if there are no other questions, we would just encourage you to mill around. I'll play a little bit more. You don't have to sit and listen. Yes?
I can ask this later, I guess, but it might be interesting for the people. When you're listening to the music, do you feel the present and the past in his music? Sometimes, like when he goes off into sort of a reverie kind of thing. And how do you?
It's interesting. I'm not sure I thought about that while I was painting.
Do you know what I mean, though? I mean, we've talked about that before. Yeah.
Laura was asking me if I hear the present and the past, the time element that Pam was talking about in these pieces. And in terms of the painting, I don't remember being conscious of that, but I'm very conscious as a listener that there are times in these pieces when what the piece is about is a memory, not the present time as you're going through the piece of music, but it's referencing an earlier time.
That's a great question. Any other questions? Oh, sure we do. Sure we do. We can sing Happy Birthday to Chopin. And then you'll have to sing. play a little bit more, but please meet each other, greet each other, get to know the paintings in person, and we will also, as I say, maybe Wendell, are you going to help with that? If anybody is, no pressure, but we have these great things for sale.
Oh, okay, great, thank you. I can take cash checks or credit cards, so.
I also,
the DVD is $25, the CDs are $10.
and there's a special if you buy a gift pack, it's $40 for the birthday. So it's $5 off. But please take an information sheet. I've got, besides a fancy picture, I've got my Paul McCartney shot here of, that's all right. I think everybody knows that story, but this is, here. Quite quickly, these same friends in Warsaw, we're trying to bring music to unusual venues such as this, and we pulled a grand piano on a potato cart through the streets of Warsaw in June 2013 for World Music Day. And so we would gather crowds. I was not the only pianist, but I was the lucky pianist. Besides bumping down on cobblestone on a cart, we pulled over at Chopin's Church of the Holy Cross, where you'll probably know his body is in Père Lachaise Cemetery. His heart is in Warsaw. He had asked that his body be cut open. You'll have to watch the film for the particulars. But we pulled over, I started playing the Raindrop Prelude, and a limousine drove by, and it was Paul McCartney, and he gave us the thumbs up, and so I felt that the Chopin was blessed. But I also wanted to say, though, that this long picture, this is the Steinway in Brendel Hall here at Wake Forest. So at any rate, if you have any questions, we've got our contact info. Thank you very, very much for being here. Thank you.